Have you ever wondered where the idea that the Catholic Church, one of the oldest and most respected institutions in the world, could be somehow under the influence of the devil? Yeah, this is not a recent accusation. Over the centuries, this theory has gained strength in times of tension, scandals, and power disputes. But what is really behind it? Let's go back in time and find out how this idea began to spread. At first, the Catholic Church was seen as undisputed moral authority. However, over the centuries, the Church's relationship with political power and wealth began to generate distrust. During the Middle Ages, for example, the abuses of power, the Crusades and the Inquisition were episodes that fed the rumors of a corrupted church and even controlled by evil forces. But it didn't stop there. During the Protestant Reform, leaders, such as Martin Luther, attacked the church for their corruption and questionable practices, which further intensified the view that the church was far from the original teachings of Christ. Finally, with the growth of anti-clerical movements, the idea that the church was combined with evil was even more widespread. These accusations did not arise out of nowhere, but in times of great crisis and confrontation of power. The church, with its grandeur and failures, was seen by many as a dangerous force. But are these theories foundation or only inventions of a troubled time? Let's explore deeper. Now, before continuing, to tell me, which city are you watching this video from? I want to know how far this message is coming, so it already leaves a comment below and takes the opportunity to strengthen this community of people who seek the truth. And don't forget, if this content made you reflect, leave the like because it helps this video reach more people who need to hear it. And of course, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so as not to lose the next videos. There's a lot of important things coming. Imagine that you live in the Middle Ages, a time of great instability, where faith was the main guide. For many people, the Catholic Church, with its immense power and influence, not only spiritually guided, but also made political decisions that affected whole kingdoms. But the question is, was the Church really just there to bring people to God, or did it also have its own power interests? For centuries, the Catholic Church positioned itself as a force that transcended the spiritual, exerting a huge political and social influence. It was common for popes and cardinals to have the power to crown kings and interfere with territorial disputes. At the same time, the Church had vast riches and properties, which fed the perception that faith was being manipulated for material purposes. Throughout history, especially in the medieval period, this fusion between spiritual and temporal power has led to situations of abuse, such as the sale of indulgences and the creation of wealth through pilgrimages. This is where the idea that the Church could be committed to something beyond faith begins to take shape. Politics, war, and money intertwine with religiosity, and the line between good and evil seems to begin to be confused. The Church, as a large institution, has always sailed in the cloudy waters of power. But what happens when spiritual intentions mix with political interests? This can lead to distrust and even give rise to darker theories, such as that evil forces could be manipulating it all. But is this how the Church sees its mission? The Bible is clear about a central theme: the struggle between good and evil. In Christianity, the devil represents the personified evil, a force that seeks to divert humans from the salvation and grace of God. But what many do not know is that behind this image of an evil being, the vision of the Catholic Church over evil goes far beyond a simple embodiment of the devil. And that raises an intriguing question. Would it be the Catholic Church as an institution, an accomplice of evil? Let's investigate this. The Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, describes the devil as the main enemy of God and humanity. However, the Catholic view of evil is not limited to a struggle between supernatural forces. The Church teaches that evil is present in everyday life, not only in an invisible spiritual battle, but also in human choices. The devil, does not only act externally, but often manifests himself in the internal temptations that deviates Christians from their faith. The Church does not see the devil as an entity that controls institutions such as the Catholic Church, but as a force that tries to divert people from the way of Christ. Thus, when someone suggests that the Church is controlled by evil forces, the accusation moves away from the Christian teaching, which sees the devil more as a temptation than a direct controller of any institution. Therefore, the Church believes that evil is in the heart of the human being and not necessarily in its institutions. But does this mean that the mistakes made within the Church are connected directly to the devil? Or is the real struggle in the responsibility of each of us to resist the temptations of evil? Let's keep exploring. Have you heard of exorcisms? Many know the image of priests in dramatic rituals, trying to expel demons from possessed people. But what does the Catholic Church really teach about the devil and possession? And are these rituals a response to evil control, or a way of fighting what the Church considers a real spiritual danger? Let's understand the Catholic view on these issues. In Catholic tradition, the devil is seen as a real force that can interfere with people's lives. The Church believes that, just as there is good that comes from God, evil also acts in the world and can manifest itself through demonic possessions. Exorcism, a religious practice that aims to expel demons, is recognized by the Church as a legitimate tool to combat evil, but only under specific conditions and the supervision of ecclesiastical authorities. The Catholic Church, unlike some religious or popular currents, does not consider that all cases of strange behavior or mental diseases are caused by possessions. However, in cases where there are clear signs of demonic influence, exorcism is performed as a last resort. The ritual is surrounded by great respect and caution, for the Church does not seek to promote fear but restore spiritual peace. Then, while the Catholic Church recognizes the presence of evil in the world, it also believes that demonic possession is not a direct action of the devil on its institutions. The devil does not control the Church, but people can be affected by it in their personal life. And the Church, as a guardian of faith, seeks to offer salvation and protection against this evil. But do these rituals still make sense in the modern world? If you could go back in time and observe the Catholic Church at the height of your power, what would you see? During the Middle Ages, many believed that the Church was the only force capable of saving souls. However, this same power generated one of the darkest periods in history, the Inquisition. What happened during these times? Was the Church really fighting evil, or did it reflect something much darker? Let's take a look at what happened. The Inquisition was a period when the Catholic Church, with the support of political authorities, pursued those considered heretics or witchcraft practitioners. Thousands of people were tortured and executed in the name of a spiritual purification, and this episode left an indelible mark in the image of the Church. These events fueled the idea that the Church was somehow combined with evil, acting extremely cruelty under the pretext of religious purification. But the Inquisition was not the only event that generated distrust. Over time, the Church has also been involved in other practices and scandals, such as the sale of indulgences and internal corruption, which created a growing distance between the faith of their faithful and the actions of ecclesiastical leaders. These attitudes were interpreted by many as signs that the Church was no longer serving God, but seeking power and control. The Inquisition and other scandals cannot be ignored when talking about the history of the Catholic Church. They represent serious flaws that contributed to the deconstruction of their image and increased distrust among many Christians. But is it fair to say that these events prove that the Church is controlled by evil? Or is these only episodes of human corruption within a large spiritual institution? When we think of the Catholic Church, many imagine grandiose temples, solemn masses, and charity. But what about the spotlight turns to the scandals and the corruption that mark the institution's history? How can we reconcile the sacred side of the Church with accusations of abuse, dishonesty, and accumulation of wealth? Does the devil somehow infiltrate the institution? Let's explore the dark aspects that shook the faith of millions. The scandal of sexual abuse within the Catholic Church has gained enormous prominence in recent decades. Cases involving priests and high-ranking leaders revealed the internal corruption that had been covered for a long time. But these scandals are just the tip of the iceberg. Throughout history, the Church has also been involved in financial issues, such as the famous sale of indulgences, where faithful paid to buy the forgiveness of sins, and other episodes of abuse of power. In addition, the popes and other members of the Church accumulated impressive riches, contrasting with the teachings of humility and service to God. These behaviors generated a huge abyss between the Church's religious discourse and the actions of its leaders, leading many to question whether the institution was, in fact, in the way of Christ, or had succumbed to power and wealth, opening gaps for evil. Scandals and corruption are not unique to any institution, but when it comes to the Catholic Church, the contrast between its teachings and the reality of its failures creates a deep moral dilemma. Do these cases contribute to the idea that malignant forces could be behind the actions of their leaders, or are it just human failures within a grand structure? The question remains open. Imagining a world where all rumors about the Catholic Church were correct, the idea that the institution itself could be under the devil's control is a strong accusation. But what does the Church itself say about it? How do ecclesiastical leaders react to these theories that arise throughout history? Let's find out what is behind this official view and understand how the Church faces such serious accusations. In response to historical accusations, the Catholic Church has always been clear in its defense. The Vatican's official position is that the Church as an institution is guided by the Holy Spirit and cannot be controlled by evil forces. The Church teaches that evil, personified in the devil, seeks to corrupt the good deeds of men, but that this does not mean that the Church as a whole is vulnerable to the control of evil. According to Catholic theology, the Church is an institution founded by Christ with the mission of spreading love and salvation. When scandals arise, the Church recognizes human failures within its ranks, but never accepts the accusation that the devil has some control over his divine mission. For the Church, it is the responsibility of each faithful to resist evil, not the religious system itself. The official position of the Church is to defend its divine mission, making it clear that although there are human failures, the institution is far from manipulated by evil forces. But is it so many flaws and scandals? Is it possible to believe this defense without question? Let's keep exploring. For centuries, the Catholic Church was a pillar of power and political influence. But as the world changed, especially with the emergence of the Enlightenment and Protestant Reformation, this influence became the target of intense criticism. Anti-clerical movements spread, and the Church was accused of maintaining oppressive control over people. And in all this, the theory arose that the Church would actually be manipulating society in its own interest. But what is the real role of the Church in the political struggles that mark the story? With the advent of the Enlightenment and the philosophical criticism of ecclesiastical power, anti-clerical movements that questioned the role of the Church in society and its influence on the state emerged. During the Protestant Reform, figures such as Martin Luther challenged the papal authority, accusing the Church of corruption and distortion of Christian teachings. This movement, coupled with new philosophies and democratic ideas, generated the belief that the Church was combining the devil to control the masses and prevent progress. The Church was seen by many as an authoritarian institution that used religion to master people and guarantee their political and economic power. Conspiracy theories multiplied, and many believed that the Church was not only involved in political intrigue, but that its power was sustained by evil forces as a form of spiritual manipulation. Anti-clericalism was a legitimate movement of struggle against abuse of power, but this fueled many conspiracy theories about the evil control of the Church. Reality, however, seems to be a little more complex. Was the Church involved in political issues? But to what extent does this prove the idea of demonic manipulation? Let's explore this question. The Catholic Church is much more than an institution. It is made up of millions of faithful around the world, people who deeply believe in the teachings of Christ and the mission of the Church. But with so many scandals and failures in recent centuries, what do the faithful themselves think about the Church? Can their faith be shaken by mistakes made by their leaders? Or do they still see the Church as a safe way to salvation? Let's find out how the faithful deal with this dilemma. Many Catholics around the world see the Church as a place of welcome, faith, and prayer, where the truth and the light of Christ can be found. However, we cannot ignore that in recent years the Church has faced serious challenges in relation to internal scandals, such as sexual abuse committed by members of the clergy. Even so, many faithful continue to see the Church as a divine institution, separating human failures from spiritual virtues. For them, the Church is not just an organization, but the house of Christ on earth. The view that the Church is controlled by evil forces seems distant to those who believe in the purity of faith. They know that the Church is formed by imperfect human beings, but believe that the true mission of the Church is to save souls and not succumb to evil. In other words, they see Church failures as men's failures, not as a representation of the devil. The faithful have a complex relationship with the Church, especially when confronted with the scandals. Even so, faith seems to prevail, and many continue to see the Church as a lighthouse of hope and salvation. This means that the accusation that the Church is under the control of evil makes no sense to them. But is this separation between faith and institutional failures enough to ignore the mistakes made within the Church? In a world full of temptations, suffering, and spiritual challenges, the Catholic Church finds itself in constant struggle against evil. But how does she, as an institution, face the influence of the devil? Is your mission to combat the forces of evil is only in speech, or are there real actions to preserve the good? Let's explore how the Catholic Church acts in this combat, and what it does to protect its faithful from evil. The Catholic Church believes that the struggle against evil is a continuous mission, both at the spiritual and practical level. She teaches that the devil tries to divert the faithful from his way through human temptations, errors, and failures. In this sense, the Church has a multifaceted approach to combat the forces of evil. Spiritually, she seeks to educate the faithful about the dangers of sin and the need to live according to the teachings of Christ. In addition, the Church performs practices such as prayer, the celebration of sacraments, and in extreme cases, exorcism, as forms of resistance against evil. The Church also actively involves charitable activities, helping the needy, fighting for social justice, and promoting peace in the world. For her, fighting evil is not just about an abstract spiritual battle, but involves acting in the physical world to relieve suffering and promote good. The Church sees its struggle against evil as a sacred and integral mission, both in the spirit world and on the ground. She believes that her true strength is to follow the teachings of Christ and to live in accordance with love and charity. But when we fail as humans, the devil finds loopholes to act. The Church continues the battle, but does it always win? Or does evil somehow still infiltrate its own corridors? So throughout our journey, we explore one of the most controversial questions in the history of Christianity. Is the Catholic Church controlled by the devil? The answer, as we have seen, is not simple. In some moments in history, the Church was accused of corruption, abuse of power, and even being involved with evil forces. But the truth, however complex, leads us to a more balanced conclusion. The Catholic Church is undoubtedly one of the largest religious institutions in the world, with billions of faithful and a history full of lights and shadows. While some see in her a power and control, others consider her where the love and truth of Christ can find. Over the centuries, human failures within the Church have generated accusations, theories, and criticism. However, the official position of the Church remains firm. It is a God-guided institution, despite the mistakes made by its members. The true battle, according to the Church, is not between an institution and evil, but between the heart of each individual and the temptations of the devil. In the end, it is important to understand that the Catholic Church is neither perfect nor immune to human failures. However, its mission is not controlled by demonic forces, but by faith and love of neighbor. The devil may try to corrupt each individual, but the Church's mission is to resist this temptation and help the faithful find the way of Christ. So the real question is not whether the Church is controlled by the devil, but how does each of us deal with temptations in our own lives? Because deep down, the battle against evil is first and foremost an internal struggle of every human being. If this video has touched your heart, be sure to let your like down here. This helps spread this message to more people who also need to hear the voice of God in their lives. Share this video with friends and family so that everyone can learn to walk closer to their Father and listen to their direction clearly. And of course, comment below what has impacted you the most or what you intend to change on your spiritual journey. I want to hear your experiences. If you have not subscribed to the channel yet, take the opportunity now to subscribe and activate notifications. Thus you will stay on top of all the transformative content we are preparing to help you grow spiritually. Remember, your mission as elected is unique, and together we can reach more people with the truth of God. If you have felt touched by this video and believe in the mission we are fulfilling here, helping to spread the true message of Christ, we want to invite you to join us even more significantly. If you want to support our work and help us continue producing content that strengthens faith and guides people on the path of truth, consider making a donation through Super Thanks. Your contribution will be fundamental so that we can expand our reach and continue bringing messages of hope, discernment, and spiritual transformation. Each donation, however small, makes a big difference in our mission. Click on the Super Thanks icon below this video and contribute what you can. We thank you immensely for your support, and may God bless you abundantly for your generous heart. Together we can impact even more lives and bring the true word of God to every corner. May God bless you abundantly, and until the next video, stay firm in faith and keep listening to the voice of God.